Imagine you're a farmer. You wake up early, work all day in the sun, and at the end of the week you have a cart full of wheat. You're hungry, not for wheat, you have plenty of that, but for meat. So you walk to your neighbor's farm and ask, "Can I trade my wheat for some of your chicken?" Your neighbor looks at the cart. Then he says, "Actually, I don't need wheat right now. I need shoes." And that's your problem. You need chicken. He needs shoes. You have wheat. Nobody's happy. This is the story of money. Not just coins and banknotes, but the entire human struggle to answer one simple question: how do we exchange value with each other fairly? The answer changed the world several times, and the story isn't over yet. Welcome to Michael's Mindcast. I'm going to take you from ancient markets in Mesopotamia all the way to a digital coin invented by a mysterious person nobody has ever met. Let's go. Let's stay with that farmer for a moment. Economists have a name for his problem. They call it the double coincidence of wants, meaning both people need to have exactly what the other person wants, at the same time, in the same place. In a world of barter, where people trade goods directly, without money, this perfect match almost never happens. You need the right person, at the right time, with the right thing. Think about it this way. If you're a doctor in a barter world and a farmer comes to you sick, what does he pay you with? Potatoes? 12 chickens? And what if you already have enough potatoes? Do you turn sick people away? Barter worked well enough in very small communities, a village of 50 people, where everyone knew each other, where people remembered favors, and where the range of goods was limited. But as communities grew, as people started specializing, some making pottery, others weaving cloth, others farming, the barter system started to crack. Something better was needed. Something everyone would accept. Something that could store value across time and carry it across distance. Something, in other words, that looked a lot like money. Here's where history gets interesting. The first forms of money weren't coins. They weren't paper. They were shells, beads, animal teeth, and in some cultures, blocks of salt. Yes, salt. In fact, the word salary, the money you earn from your job, comes from the Latin word for salt, salarium. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. That's how valuable it was. What made something work as money? It had to be widely accepted, meaning everyone agreed it had value. It had to be portable, easy to carry. Durable, it couldn't rot or break. And divisible, you had to be able to make change. In Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, around 3000 BCE, merchants used silver by weight to pay for goods. No coins yet, just scales and silver bars and agreed values. Primitive, but real money in spirit. Then, around 600 BCE, something remarkable happened in the kingdom of Lydia in what is now Western Turkey. The Lydians created the world's first standardized coins, made of a gold-silver alloy, stamped with the image of a lion. That stamp guaranteed the coin's weight and purity. This was a massive leap forward because it introduced trust into the system. You didn't need to weigh the coin yourself. You trusted the king's mark. And that word, currency, comes from the Latin currere, meaning to flow. Money flows between people, between businesses, between countries. Greece, Persia, China, Rome, they all developed their own currencies within a few centuries. As trade routes expanded, the Silk Road, Mediterranean shipping lanes, coins became the universal language of commerce. But coins had a problem, a big one. They were heavy. If you were a merchant traveling across continents with a chest full of gold coins, you were also traveling with a target on your back. Robbers, pirates, bandits. Gold was worth dying for and killing for. So someone had a better idea. Stay with me, because what happened next completely changed the relationship between money and trust. And once you understand this, you'll understand why every dollar, every euro, every pound in your wallet today is technically worth nothing. Except that we all agree it is. It started in China. Around the 7th century CE, during the Tang dynasty, merchants found a clever solution. Instead of carrying gold, they deposited it with a trusted merchant and received a paper receipt in return. When they reached their destination, they showed the receipt and collected gold from a connected merchant there. These receipts began circulating as payment themselves. Why carry the gold when the paper represented the gold? By the 10th century, the Song dynasty formalized this into government-issued paper money. the world's first official banknotes. They called it jiaozi. When Marco Polo arrived in China in the 13th century and described paper money to Europeans, they laughed. Paper as payment? It sounded absurd. Europe came around eventually, by necessity. By the 17th century, goldsmiths in England were issuing paper receipts to people who deposited gold with them. Those receipts were traded, and those goldsmiths became the first banks. And here's where it gets clever and dangerous. The goldsmiths noticed that most people didn't collect their gold all at once, so they started lending out most of it, charging interest, and keeping only a small fraction in the vault. This is what we now call fractional reserve banking. You deposit 1,000 euros. The bank keeps maybe 100 and lends out the rest. That creates more money circulating in the economy, which fuels growth. But it also creates risk, because if everyone shows up at the same time asking for their money back, the bank simply can't pay. When it worked, it drove economic growth. When it didn't, when people panicked, you got a bank run. History is full of them. Now here's the philosophical point I want you to sit with. Paper money only works because everyone agrees it works. There's no gold in your wallet. The euro in your pocket isn't backed by a physical commodity anymore. Most countries abandoned that system in the 20th century. What gives it value is a shared belief, backed by governments and institutions. This type of money has a name: fiat currency. Fiat is Latin for "let it be done." Governments simply declare that this piece of paper is legal money, and because everyone accepts that declaration, it works. The dollar, the euro, the yen, all fiat currencies. Worth something because we all agree they are. It's one of the most remarkable acts of collective trust in human history. But trust, as we know, can break down. Throughout history, money has collapsed, spectacularly, repeatedly. The key mechanism is inflation, the rate at which prices rise over time. A little inflation is normal and even healthy. Prices go up slowly, people keep spending, economies keep moving. But when inflation runs out of control, the results are catastrophic. In Weimar Germany in the early 1920s, the government printed enormous amounts of money to pay its war debts. Prices rose so fast that people needed wheelbarrows of banknotes to buy a loaf of bread. Workers were paid twice a day because by evening, the money was worth less than it had been at lunch. People burned banknotes for heat. It was cheaper than wood. More recently, Zimbabwe in the 2000s printed a $100 trillion banknote. 100 trillion. Still not enough to buy a loaf of bread. These aren't just economic curiosities. They're reminders that money is only as strong as the institution behind it. When governments lose control, through war, corruption, mismanagement, currencies collapse, and ordinary people suffer most. So here's a question. What if you could create a form of money that didn't depend on any government, any bank, any institution at all? That was the idea behind Bitcoin. Before I explain how Bitcoin actually works, and why some people think it's the future of money while others think it's the biggest bubble in history, let me explain the technology underneath it. Because once you understand it, everything else makes sense. In 2008, right in the middle of a global financial crisis, when banks were collapsing and governments were bailing them out with public money, an anonymous person or group using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a 9-page paper. It described a new kind of digital currency. Bitcoin. The timing wasn't a coincidence. The message was clear. What if we didn't need banks at all? Bitcoin runs on a technology called the blockchain. Think of it as a shared digital record book, a ledger that tracks every transaction ever made. But instead of one bank keeping that record, thousands of computers around the world each hold a copy. No single person controls it. No single institution can change it. Every transaction is recorded publicly, permanently, automatically. When you send money through a bank, the bank records it. The bank is the middleman. Bitcoin removes that middleman entirely. The network itself keeps the record. This is what we mean by decentralization, spreading control across many participants instead of keeping it in one central place. Traditional banking is centralized. A central bank sets the rules. Commercial banks follow them, and you follow the commercial banks. Bitcoin flips that model. There's no center, no authority, just the network. Bitcoin also solved the problem of scarcity. A government can always print more money, which is partly why inflation happens. Bitcoin has a hard limit. Only 21 million will ever exist. That limit is written into the code itself. Nobody can change it. Supporters say this makes Bitcoin sound money that holds its value because its supply can't be manipulated. Critics point out that Bitcoin's price is extremely volatile. Volatile means it moves dramatically, up and down, fast. Bitcoin can gain or lose 30, 40, 50% of its value in a matter of weeks. That makes it fascinating for investors, but unreliable as an everyday currency. You can't run a business if the money you accept today is worth half as much tomorrow. Both sides have a point. And beyond Bitcoin, the world of cryptocurrency, digital currencies secured by code, has exploded. There are thousands of them now. Some are serious technological projects. Others were created as jokes. One was a coin based on a dog meme that briefly became worth more than the GDP of some countries. We live in strange times. So where does all of this leave us? The traditional system is still very much alive. Central banks, commercial banks, fiat currencies, digital payments. When you tap your phone to pay for coffee, you're using digital money, but it's still euros or dollars, still backed by institutions, still part of the old structure. At the same time, central banks around the world are developing their own digital currencies called CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. These would be digital versions of national money, with the convenience of crypto but the control of government. China is already piloting the digital yuan. The European Central Bank is exploring a digital euro. This matters for something economists call monetary policy, the decisions a central bank makes about interest rates and the money supply to control inflation and keep economies stable. Digital currencies could change how that works in ways we're only beginning to understand. And then there's DeFi, decentralized finance, which tries to rebuild the entire banking system on blockchain. Lending, borrowing, saving, investing, all without a bank in the middle. It's experimental, risky, and still full of failures and scams. But the underlying idea is genuinely radical. We're watching, in real time, a reimagining of what money even is. Let's come back to that farmer with his cart of wheat. His problem, how to exchange value fairly with a stranger, is the same problem humans have been trying to solve for thousands of years. From bartering grain for meat, to weighing silver in ancient Mesopotamia, to stamped coins in Lydia, to paper receipts in Tang Dynasty China, to the banknote in your wallet, to a line of code on a blockchain, every chapter of this story is the same search, a better system of trust. Because that's what money really is. Not gold, not paper, not code, trust. Shared, collective, fragile, powerful trust. And every time that trust breaks, through hyperinflation, through bank runs, through financial crises, we rebuild it in a new form. Sometimes better, sometimes worse, always different. The story of money is really the story of civilization itself, how we cooperate with strangers, how we store the value of today's work for tomorrow's needs, how we decide, together, without ever sitting in the same room, what something is worth. Whether Bitcoin becomes a global reserve currency, fades into a footnote, or something we haven't imagined yet takes its place, the question at the center of it all stays the same. Who do you trust? That's worth thinking about. Until next time, keep asking good questions.